And so, okay, so here we are. We're going to go right into this, folks, with some protocol first, but an introduction before that. So I'm Prof. Langdana, and I'm a professor in the Finance and Economics department here. This is for those of you who are on for the first time. And I'm the director of the Executive MBA program here in New Jersey and the academic director of our Singapore program. And as you heard, we were in Beijing, Shanghai, and Singapore very actively. I've been in China since '91. So the China story is over. And so today, it was actually a day that was fraught with excitement. A lot was going on today. The class is graduating tomorrow. So before we go any further, graduates of the class of 2022, Executive MBA and my Wednesday evening class, congratulations for tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow morning at NJPAC. So congratulations. And next week, this time almost, I'll be off. We are going back to Europe after all these years. The EMBA program is going to Copenhagen and Athens this year. So there was enough going on today. And now the stock market misbehaves today, over 1,000 points. And I'm like, I didn't need this extra competition and complication. And you know, to begin with, this semester actually has not gone according to plan. You know, I started in January thinking, okay, this is going to be back to a nice, stable, boring world where we'll have a nice stage 2 recovery, a demand pull Keynesian recovery, and we'll just get into it. Man, that didn't happen. Exogenous shock after exogenous shock. And for those of you who've forgotten, exogenous is from outside, shock after shock after shock. And then just when we were pulling out of COVID and we were going, Putin has to do his craziness and that horrible miscalculation. So we will talk about that. So it was one thing after another, not nearly as boring and calm a semester as I thought it would be. And of course, today is adding to that craziness. So I'm going to go right into it. We're going to start with the topic itself, stagflation. You keep hearing that word over and over again. And what's interesting is that if you were under 55 years old, you don't know what inflation is. If you weren't here in the 70s, you never seen it. That's the weird thing about this story. So you have people talking about stagflation, and stagflation, just the definition is very simply stagnant output. So output flat or falling, stagnant or falling output, falling jobs, and rising inflation. So stagflation, stagnant or falling output, which we will call Y, and we're going to go into the whiteboard soon, and rising inflation, the worst of both worlds. And they keep going on, stagflation is coming, we have stagflation. Yeah, technically we do, but they are implicitly referring to the great stagflation of the 1970s. And remember, as we saw in class, when macroeconomists have no idea as to what happened, they put a great in there, the great stagflation. And they were clueless. The whole thing was a monstrous mess, as we will see. And so they put a great in there, implying that mere mortals couldn't have figured this out. Hence the great stagflation, the Great Depression, you know, the great housing crisis, the Great Recession, so on and so forth. And so let's examine the great stagflation. It's not just a stagflation. What happened in the 70s? There was a paradigm shift. We will discuss what a paradigm shift is. And by the way, I see Ahmed Al-Brolisi there, and I'm going to do a shout out. He is the first executive MBA to get his DBA, his doctorates in business administration, in our program run by Suresh Govindaraj next week. Ahmed,
thank you for your support. It's because of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, but no, it's all you, man. And I'll see you at your defense next week. But I saw you there. I had to do a shout out.
Thank you.
So I'm going to take you back, and you have to understand, folks, that without history, there is no macroeconomics. You know, you heard me say this before, but without understanding history, Macro policy means nothing. It's like making a sandwich without bread, you know, incomplete. And that's the problem. So many of our answers today for off macro policy and even global strategy, they're there in history. You heard me say this before, but it's almost like having a cheat sheet or crib notes where the answer's already there. You know, what should Biden have done in the Ukraine? It was there. The convoys, you know, we escorted the convoys across, ironically, to Russia and World War. It was all there. There was a game plan already there. So I'm going to take you back in time to Jimmy Carter and the great stagflation. And bless him, Jimmy Carter, great president in that in many ways, brilliant guy, engineer, nuclear engineer, physicist, something like that. Sweet man, still builds homes and builds furniture for poor people, lives in a modest home, but he was unlucky. He was unlucky. God bless him. And he had a problem with messaging. He was doom and gloom. I'll take you back there. And for Mr. Prof, for President Biden, I have some messages too. I think he's got the same team that wrote Jimmy Carter's speeches. I really do think so, but more later on. And so he was unlucky. We'll talk about what happened in the 70s very soon. But just before we get into that, Napoleon famously said, I don't necessarily want great generals on my team. Send me lucky ones. Jimmy was unlucky. So we'll see what happened, what went wrong. So I'm going to share the screen now, and we're going to go into the whiteboard, and we're going to go to maximum power. So here's the roadmap. We'll just do a quick macro review of the Keynesian model. There are two models we look at, the Keynesian model and the supply-sider model. So I'm going to bring it back up to many of you. Some of you were in my class now who should remember it. Some of you, it's been a few years. I see Len there. I see all those familiar names. My gosh. And that's just one page. There are 8 pages here. Prachi, we are making, we're capturing these pictures, right?
We are indeed. Yes,
There.
we are.
Thank you. Thank you. That's the problem with the Zoom thing. I can't say hi to you all. So let's do this. So yeah, the roadmap. So we're going to do a macro overview first. Then we're going to look at the 70s and Jimmy Carter and the stagflation. Then we're going to fast forward to what's happening now. And Jay Powell with his interest rate hikes. It's going to be very interesting because he's raised interest rates by 0.5% a few weeks ago. And he's all hot and worked up, like, I'm going to raise rates 6 more times. The game has changed. It's not conventional inflation, as we will see. There's cost push and demand pull. This is a complex thing that's happening. This is what's going to separate real macroeconomists from wannabe ones. This, what he does or does not do, stop raising rates, stop scaring people, short answer, is going to separate the men from the boys, the ladies from the girls, as we will see. So I'm going to go to, hi Bill, I'm going to go to the Fed too. And it's really hard. I'm telling you, it's really hard for me to stay focused and be professorial and talk about macro as opposed to going to each or every one of these little posted size faces and reminiscing. Like, hi, remember the time we forgot you at the Great Wall in China, for example? Okay, let's go to macro and Microsoft whiteboard, and let's share and try not to panic. I thought I would set it up for you, but I'm going to create a new whiteboard. So let's start from scratch. I know this is why I didn't like PowerPoint. I had it all up, but I want to work through it with you. Okay, so here's what we're going to do now. We're going to do a review. Okay, stay with me, and I'm going to power up fully. So this is the conventional model that everybody knows, and the media, and on top of everything today, the media, reporters talk about the stock market crash. I felt like saying, well, in fact, I told one of them, join me at 7:30. And later on, Prachi, if you could drop in to the WhatsApp, to the chats, the link to the interview I did last week, That might help later on today, if you don't mind, please. Okay, let's do a macro review. Stay with me now. So here on this axis, this makes sense. We'll work through it together. I thought I'd put it all up there for you, and it freaked me out. So I know what that would do to you after seeing this for like after 20, 30 years. So this is output and jobs on this axis. It's being recorded, right? Did hit that button. And this is inflation on this axis, which we will call P today, and output and jobs we will call Y. And so this, the model here, this is what we all know. This is the most common one. So this is total supply. This is called the aggregate supply. And you've seen, many of you seen this before. And oh, regarding questions, here's the protocol, everyone. Just shout them out. If there's a burning question that you have, just just ask me, unmute yourselves and ask me, please. And of course, we now know there's a 2-3 second lag. That's okay. Come into mid-sentence, not a problem. If it can wait, send it to me in the chat. And keep in mind, when I'm in whiteboard, I can't see the chats. They're already 13, you know. And I will respond to every single question, I promise, later on by email, like I always do in my webinars. So Prachi will capture the questions for me, and might take me a little longer this time since I'll be traveling, but in a week or so, you will have responses to all your questions. But again, if it's pressing, just jump in and ask me, and trust me, every time you ask me a question, how many people do we have now? 207? Okay, 50 people will secretly thank you. All right, so that's the aggregate supply. And here's the aggregate demand, total demand of the economy. Tanks, guns, planes, aggregate demand. Tanks, guns, planes, software, tourism, everything. And so here is an initial inflation rate, P for prices, P0, and here is initial output rate, Y0. And here, that's like Y maximum and full employment. So everybody who's working, who can work is working. So that's that point right below that vertical line there. All right, so this is the Keynesian diagram, and it should all be coming back to you wherever we've worked together on this planet. So let's say that there is a problem here with output. You can follow my cursor right in here. Let's say output is low, and Microsoft Zoom has started this new feature of having these rectangles pop up, and it is so aggravating, but I'm learning to live with it. So let's say this is Y0, there's low output, and you need to jumpstart this economy. It's dead in the water, there are not enough jobs. And so and what Keynes taught us was you move the aggregate demand to the right. This was a very big deal then, AD1, this here was AD0. And so you move the curve out to the right. This is known as jump starting an economy. And the way Keynes taught, this is in the 1930s when we had the Great Depression. And so Keynes, and why was this radical? Does anybody remember when Keynes proposed moving the curve to the right? You're looking at this diagram and thinking, Langdana, that seems so obvious, you know, by increasing government spending, by increasing the money supply or decreasing interest rates, which is the same thing, and by cutting taxes.
Is even moving the fourth grade that? Yeah, fourth grade.
So, Lizette, if you could just mute your, thank you, please, thank you. Great hearing from you, by the way, your kids. So going from blue to red, why was this such a big deal for Keynes? Anybody? Does it coming back? It seems so obvious. Well, move the curve to the right.
Unemployment lines.
Government
No
intervention.
deficit spending. They were against deficit spending.
Government. So, well, all of those, I guess, all those familiar names flashing by, because there were, at that point, there was no role for government. Government was not supposed to get involved in the economy. The Fed was not supposed to get involved in the economy. So Keynes said, be activist, move that down line from blue to red. And so let me just put in some other features now. I'm setting it up, and in black, we have also C bar and I bar. And that C bar from now is consumer confidence. All of you should remember this. And those of you joining us, C bar is consumer confidence. It's a survey that measures confidence, mostly consumer durables. Were you going to buy a new fridge? If not, why not? Were you going to buy a new car, a new house? If not, why not? For investors, are you going to hire more people? Are you going to do capital investment? If not, why not? Okay, so investor confidence, consumer confidence, if they go up, that curve also moves to the right. Very important. Okay, now, why is it in a different color? Pierre, go ahead, Pierre, ask me your question.
Yeah, just listening to that, just wondering off the top of my head, how reliable is it to base the entire system off of surveys when,
Wow.
the people giving the answers aren't very reliable for giving
Wow,
accurate answers?
great question, great question. And you know what, Pierre, the thing is though, if the sample size is big enough, you can get away with that, and what guys like me do is we don't just base on surveys, we're looking out the window like Keynes did, we are looking for signs out there. So there are many proxies, like for consumer confidence, help wanted ads, it's a thing called liquidity trap. Interest rates are low, but companies are not borrowing to do capital investments. So they're not just looking at those two surveys.
You can also look at the conference calls from Target or Walmart. They know how much people are buying at one time and everything. One of the reasons the market fell is because of that.
Absolutely. So C bar and I bar, they're intangibles and they're in different colors because it's not a button that Biden can press. So those are endogenous. That's a word we use a lot. They're endogenous, which means they're organic. They come from inside. So no one can tell me, Langdana, the future is great. Come on, go buy a new car. You don't have a Tesla? You don't have a Tesla? Go buy a Tesla. I wouldn't, but go buy a Tesla. And so, of course, I'll go, get out of here. In this kind of economy, no. But so that's not a button you can press. It's organic, it's internal. C bar and I bar hate tax increases. I bar, investor confidence, hates business tax increases. It hates uncertainty. It hates too much government regulation. So, and they're in different color because they're not buttons to press. The red, those are buttons to press. The government can press those buttons. Now keep in mind, this G, when Keynes proposed it, that's today what we will call good G. Today there's a huge controversy. What is this government spending? So there are two groups of people today. One group says G should only be infrastructure, the power grid, protecting us from hacking, protecting our businesses from being hacked. Defense now, because now once again, we have to pivot back to a conventional warfare system. Once again, we can't ignore our main battle tanks after Ukraine. Once again, tanks are important. Once again, you're gonna have helicopter gunships, the latest version of various weapon systems, javelins and so on. Another group says G should include transfer payments, unemployment benefits, health care, aid for single parents, aid for daycare. And so that's the controversy today about G, good G or bad G. So I'm going to say good G. In Keynes' time, there was only one G, infrastructure spending, which later became a highway system, Tennessee Valley Project, the Hoover Dam, and so on. Anyway, so this is called jumpstarting an economy. Now look at this carefully. In this world here, you have, let's change colors. As Y goes up from Y0 to Y1, inflation goes up from P0 to P1. This is very important. So here, inflation is pi, by the way, in macroeconomics. So pi is inflation, pi is inflation. Inflation here is pro-cyclical. So in this is the model that pretty much everybody in the media refers to implicitly. Inflation is a pro-cyclical thing. As output goes up, P goes up, prices go up. As output goes down, P goes down. Pro-cyclical, they move together. This is inflation when everyone refers to as inflation. And please understand, this you can call this the good kind of inflation because output's gone up. So the higher inflation goes hand in hand with more output and more jobs. It's the good kind of inflation. This is the inflation that the Fed can, if this goes too high, right in here, you can see that's an overheated economy. So when you're hitting that maximum point, look, because remember down here, I told you, this is Y maximum. So this, you reach the maximum output point, everybody who works can work is at work. So out here, it's an overheated economy, bubbles start developing here. Behold the bubble in the stock market. Okay, I'm taking you right into it. So we call them, when we were in class, we call them SAP bubbles. SAP stands for speculative asset price. All this should be downloading, coming back for those of you who worked with me before. SAP bubbles, speculative asset price, housing, S&P 500, cryptocurrencies, SPACs, earlier dot-coms. I don't have to go on. And so this is an overheated economy, and this, wherever you like, this is what the Fed can fix. And this is called a soft landing, hitting the brakes, soft landing. So the Fed raises interest rates, let's call this, raises interest rates and moves that curve back. So to move it to the right, it jumpstarts it by increasing spending, by lowering interest rates, jumpstarts it. To calm things down, to slow things down, soft landing by raising interest rates, which is what Jay Powell did a few weeks ago, 0.5% increase, the largest one since the year 2000. Does anybody know what happened in the year 2000? Why the Greenspan, that was, raised interest rates so savagely? Hint, bubbles. This is the way you prick a bubble.
Tech bubble.
Yes, thank you. The dot-com bubble. And finally, bang, 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 4 interest rate hikes, right after one after another. And he tried to calm down because you have to do it soon. You can't wait for this baby to go all the way up here. You're going to have a monster crash. So right in here, typically, you start bringing this baby down. You soft land it. And the word soft landing comes from the lunar landings. So the lunar module had to gently soft land on the surface of the moon, of course. And that's where it came. That's where we crossed over into macro, to gently soft land. I'll never forget, I was in class once and I mentioned this and somebody in class said, moon landing. Have you been on moon? Humans? And I went, yeah. We have. And I went, yeah. Nothing surprises me anymore. Nothing surprises me.
Did they believe that the moon landing was staged or
No,
something?
see, that could be the only possibility, that the flag was fluttering. It was happening in Hollywood. But I'm not so sure. But anyway, no stories today, Jennifer. I'm going to stay on target, be focused. Okay, so that's a soft, listen carefully now. This demand pull inflation is what the Fed can control. I'm just recapping. So raising interest rates, and Jay Powell has this on his radar screen. This is what he was born and brought up on. This is a simple story, to the right and to the left, to the right and to the left. What earlier I mentioned, stagflation, I defined stagflation. Let's change colors. Stagflation was an increase in inflation and a decrease in Y. Looking at this diagram, how is that possible? P going up, but Y going down. I mean, how is that possible here?
No productivity, nobody's spending.
Yeah, you're right, Jennifer.
Supply moves to
Oh,
the
and
left.
Jennifer Kirby, I mentioned precedents. That's another class precedent. 2005, the first year we got on any kind of ranking. Come on, someone else.
The supply
We-
curve moves to the left.
Wow,
Yep.
Jessica. Yes, Jessica from my class Wednesday night. So here we go. So clearly in this demand pull world, it's not possible. If P goes up, Y is supposed to go up. So this diagram is not the diagram for stagflation. And the Feds, I'm not so sure. Let's go step by step. So I'm going to clear this and then let's come down here. So here we are. Here is the other diagram. Here's aggregate supply, the Keynesian. Keynes came up with this diagram. Here is aggregate demand, the total demand and total supply. Here is P0 and here is Y0. And so that was the demand pull story I had up earlier. Well, there's another story, and that is the cost push story. The aggregate supply curve gets shoved to the left. This is called cost push inflation, and this is the complication this time. Cost push inflation. And here, this is an oil shock. This textbook examples were oil shocks. Poor Jimmy Carter had not one, but two. Then he had the hostage crisis. It was one thing after another. And the rescue operation. I can go on and on. Ukraine, COVID.
China lockdown.
Oh my gosh, post-COVID. And you know, China, what a difference between Zhu Rongji, Jiang Zemin, Deng Xiaoping. Anyway, all right, so post-COVID shocks, supply chains, we know all about those. COVID lockdowns, China today, another lockdown again. So, boom, it's also known as commodity inflation. So oil shocks, this textbook example, tied to Ukraine. The COVID shocks, when all the supply chains were torn apart, those distancing, spacing. We've talked about this in a blog before and in a webinar. Post-COVID shocks still lingering with supply chain. So look at this now. In this case, you have P going up, P1, and Y going down. So here we are. Inflation here is counter-cyclical. So very big difference, folks, very big. And this is a rare kind, this is episodic. So the media, they don't really talk. This is not the default inflation understood by the media, okay? And so here, P goes up and Y goes down. So this is output and jobs, remember. So they're both being hammered, output and jobs. They're both being hammered. And listen carefully now, the cost push inflation, there's nothing the government can do about it. This is not Biden's fault. Biden has other issues, but this is not his fault. End of story. Let's not even go there. So this is exogenous. Cost push inflation is exogenous, as the name implies, from outside. Boom. Ukraine, COVID, and boom. And typically cost push inflation is short. Yom Kippur War ends. The Iran crisis ends. You know, it has been temporary, the flooding of India, monsoons. So monsoons fail in India, flooding, weather, let's put weather. Monsoons fail in India, Indian inflation is typically cost push, by the way. And so the rain comes and it dissipates by itself. The oldest example of cost push inflation, by the way, is the Old Testament. Pharaoh had this dream of 7 fat cows being, I think it was cows, devoured by 7 skinny cows and then 7 fat cows. And then of course, Joseph analyzed it for him and he said, cost push inflation for agricultural cycles, cost push inflation. So what to do? Have a food storage, have a food reservoir, petroleum reserve, as we call it. So the only way to combat this is save food, save oil, semiconductors, once we can make them for the future. There is no macro response. So cost push inflation is a body blow. That's how I've described it. You take it. And it's usually short term until COVID. That baby stayed for 2 years. COVID is still there. China is still under lockdown. Next week, taking all these N95s on our trip, hoping, well, one day at a time. And so didn't go away, lingered, and then Ukraine, and so God knows how long that's going to last. So there it is. Cost push inflation, counter-cyclical, usually temporary, not this time. This is known as the bad kind of inflation because nothing good comes out of it. P went up, but output went down, and there's not a thing you can do about it. Let's see if you get confused. You guys tell me now while we're in this diagram, you are Jay Powell, and you don't really get that part of your inflation. I'm going to show you the whole details in just a few minutes, but you are Jay Powell now, and you don't really understand that this isn't, let's scroll up. What happened? Not letting me scroll for some reason. And so let me erase the board. Anyway, so you are in this world, you don't realize that this is not demand pull inflation. This is cost push inflation. What would happen here? Let's call this Y0. Let's call this Y low. What would happen here if you tried to do a soft landing? What would that cause in this story? You tried to move the aggregate demand to the left, just like you did. Oh, here we are. So here we are, look at this. So here, remember, he in this demand pull, he could calm the economy down. He'd bring prices down and inflation down. Well, here though, if he tries that, look at what's happened here. You already are at Y low. You see earlier up below in the diagram right above, you were at Y high. You were overheating. Here, see here, see here, you were at Y high. You were overheating. So it was a good thing to take this to slow the speed of the train, to slow the train down so it wouldn't derail, going too fast. So you were at Y high, Y1, which is high. But here, now look at this in cost push, you're already at Y low. You see what I'm saying? Now what would happen if he says, I'm gonna do 6 more interest rate hikes? What would happen here?
Recession.
Unemployment goes up.
Yes, so you make the economy even worse. So you're taking inflation down, but look at this, why even lower? Are you with me now? You seeing this, everybody? And so cost push inflation, it's complicated. You don't just keep hitting the brakes because the patient is already slowing, the economy is already slowing down. You're going to make it even more slowed down, So store that away. There is a fever. Inflation is high. The patient has a fever, but the causes are different this time. Maybe the cure may not have to be so drastic as it was in the demand pull inflation case. Okay, so store that away.
Good evening, Farooq.
Hey, Paul.
How are you?
Good hearing from you. I'd recognize that voice anywhere, though.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you're going to talk a bit about how, in the scenario you have here, Y max is actually lower than it has been in the past because maximum employment, we are close to maximum employment now.
Beautiful.
But the number of people who are maximally employed is a lot less than it used to be. So how does that play into it?
Wow, Paul. Wow. Okay. I'm going to take you there. That was part of my plan. So Paul is just saying, well, wait. Where are we now? I mean, if you're looking at this diagram, this Y should be Y1, which is kind of high. All right. Well, we are growing at we were growing at 3.5%. We are now minus 1.4 last quarter. We're in recession. So Langdana, this Y is not kind of what you drew. And this full employment you went on about, well, the labor market's tight. You can't get workers, but the number of people working is small. Lots of people are just not in the workforce. Taking you there. This is a complication. And there are no workers out there. Just personally, we are hiring somebody on the executive MBA team. We normally would get 200, 300 applicants. We got 9. So we checked to make sure the ad went out, and it went out. So we extended the window by another month. We might get 5 more. 9. It used to be 300.
I can tell
So-
you as a financial advisor, I'm watching a lot of boomers check out and they're saying, you know what, the hell with it, I'm done.
That's the big
Every
one.
day, every day, every day.
Jennifer, that's the big one. So what Jennifer is telling us is that the participation rate, people who are looking for work, wanting to work, has plunged. Participation rate has plunged. In fact, it is down to 62.2%. It is below 2020's level. In 2021, it was 61.6%.
I'm just wondering, sorry to cut in, I'm wondering how much of this could be because of the gig economy?
It's a multitude of things. You know, the boomers are retiring is a big one, by the way. So the labor force is very superheated, is very tight. For every 2 job openings, there's 1 worker. Large number of people have died. We forgot, we don't realize that. We forget that. Immigration has slowed down. We forget that too, going back to the Trump era. But the boomers, that's a big one. And there is some women especially have been severely affected because during COVID, many had to pull out of the workforce to be home with the kids. And now they're still home with the kids, And so everyone doesn't have the luxury of working from home, interestingly.
There's massive teacher and nurse shortages now.
Yeah.
And that's COVID related, and they're retiring. I've got a lot of teacher boomers who are just taking their pension and going for a walk.
Yeah, they're exhausted. They're done. They're done. And this is huge. And COVID and boomers were retiring for a while, but now the fat part of the distribution is retiring. And the birth rate is low, very low, and the immigration has been curtailed. So all those students like me who would have graduated 4 or 5 years ago and come into the workforce, that's gone. So participation rates rate of women, participation rate, since we are on the subject, is only 57.4%. That's as low as 1988. So women have been hammered. They're out of the workforce in large numbers. So what Paul just asked us is, okay, there's lots more going on, and I'm going to show you. The economy is not at Y1. We're growing at, negative. We had a recession, and before that it was only 3%. And Y max, full employment. Well, what is that in this world? So let me take you there. I'm going to clear the boards now. Clear canvas. Okay. All right. So what we've done is I've defined cost push demand pull, and let's now go back in time and look at the great stagflation. And so back in time, and what exactly happened, and paradigm shifts. You have to understand that. So paradigm shift, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Should I be looking at the chats here, Prachi?
I think you covered most of it. We do have a few questions, but I thought maybe we could give it to you later.
Thank you, Prachi. E-bar, I don't know what E-bar is. I don't think I said it. I meant C-bar and I-bar. Unless it was a joke. Vaidi. Did he say that? Okay, all right. Yes, Raj, what we have is cost push and demand pull, and I'm going to show you that. Okay, so stay with me here. Let's talk about paradigm shifts. So this is something that's quite unique in macro, and you're not going to find this in too many textbooks. The media still don't get it. here's what happened. When we talk about the great stagflation, we're trying to see, are we going to have a really bad stagflation? You need to know what happened in the 70s and why it became so crazy. In 70s, the numbers are inflation went to 13.5%. That was 14%, roughly the high. Unemployment was around 18. 7.7% in 1977, in some sectors as high as 18%. So 8% overall, but in some sectors really high. So unemployment is around 3% right now, but again, today's number is very confusing. But inflation was 13.5%. Today's inflation is 8.3%. So different ballpark. So what's the paradigm shift? What happens is that in engineering and in sciences, there are some rules that always work, some equations that describe everything. And those are Newton's 3 laws of motion. So the ball will roll down the hill always at the same speed, in the same time, no matter where. In China, in Bombay, in New Jersey, in 25 BC, in 1980 today, those equations always work. The problem with macro is different equations, which are models, work for different periods of time. That's the problem in macro. Why? What is that all about? Here is an example. So if you were to design a bridge, this is what I used in class with many of you. If you were to build a bridge, you design a bridge. I'm a civil engineer by training. So you design a bridge, you call it blueprint X, and there's your bridge in year 1. In year 5, in that part of the country, you need to design another bridge. It has the same specifications, that same blueprint dusted off, and that bridge will work. And on and on and on. As long as the specs are the same, that same design will work. In macro, it doesn't. In macro, what happens is when a policy that works in year 1, people remember what happened after that. So, oh, you have inflation in year 1, no jobs. Okay, so you raise interest rates, you cut taxes, you do whatever you have to do, and you fix the economy. Stock market goes up 20%. Wow, it worked. Sorry, excuse me. 5 years from now, you have the same problem. Inflation's high, people out of work, whatever. Same problem. And you now replicate what you did. You try to. It often will not work. Because now people, excuse me. Because now people remember what happened in year 1. And this time, in year 5, they will go, wait a minute. 5 years ago, the feds fixed it, the government fixed it, but the market went up 20%, interest rates shot down, whatever. This time, people will behave differently. This time they'll go, hey, they're going to do the same thing. Let's now move into the stock market. Or let's get ahead of the curve and buy a house, whatever. So they react differently this time to the same policy in the same scenario. This is not like a ball rolling down the hill where the friction stays the same. Now the response is different and the results are different. So now you enact the same policy and it doesn't work. It's a paradigm shift. You go from one macroeconomic model to another one. And often when that happens, you don't know what's happening. And so you're making policies in that old model, and now you're trying to replicate it. People are behaving differently. That old model has stopped working. Now it's a different model. And if you don't catch on in time, you're on the wrong page. You started off in an Indian restaurant. Now it became an Italian restaurant, and you are in a paradigm shift in macroeconomics and you don't know it. And you're still ordering as if you're in an Indian restaurant. And I'm going to go back to whiteboard and show you this is what happened in the 70s. We went from the Keynesian model to the supply side model. But to be able to figure that out while it's happening is almost impossible, especially at that point in time. And so you keep making the same policy mistakes. You don't realize it's become an Italian restaurant, and you're going on, you're ordering samosas, you're ordering, vegetable korma. It's just this funky stuff is coming back from the kitchen, and you're going, what is, you're ordering dal and you're getting minestrone soup, and you're going, what is this? It's become an Italian restaurant. So paradigm shift. And it's a disaster when that happens. So I'm going to take you there in terms of what happened in the 70s. Just as an aside, in an Indian restaurant, never ever say naan bread, please. Naan means bread. So when you say naan bread, you're saying bagel bread. Just say naans, because the waiters are making fun in the back. So inside scoop, making you a little cooler. And in return, I would like tips for Italian restaurants. And so here we are. Let's go to Microsoft Whiteboard and share. And here we are. So let's see what happened. Paradigm shift, the great stagflation. And here we are. Here is when the 70s began. Nice conventional Keynesian aggregate supply curve. Keynesian aggregate supply. Here's aggregate demand. Here is P0 and Y0. Now listen carefully, folks. For this, let's draw a line here. Come up here. For this story to hold, implicit in this Keynesian aggregate supply curve in here is a fundamental assumption that percentage change in wages, your paycheck, is equal to percentage change in prices, in inflation. So this is the DNA for this diagram that's above it. You have, each of these comments I'm making, by the way, is like a 3-hour class. In fact, it is a 3-hour class. So I'm just giving you the tip, what you need to know today. So this is the DNA, this is the motherboard equation, if you will, but absolute. So in this world here, oh, sorry. Percentage change in inflation here is less, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, is less than percentage change in wages is less than percentage change in inflation. So for this diagram to hold, which you have above you there, if inflation is 5%, wages only grow at say 2.1%. So inflation is always higher than wage growth for that diagram to hold. Store that away. Okay, if inflation is 3%, wages grow by anything less than 3%, and you will have that diagram. If on the other hand, yeah, go ahead, Gopalan.
No, sorry.
Okay. If on the other hand, you have this situation, percentage change in wages is equal to percentage change in inflation. So if inflation is 5%, and you guys all get 5%, then that diagram I'm about to draw is going to be your operational diagram. That's the fundamental story here. So here on the right-hand side, inflation is equal to wage. On the left-hand side, inflation is greater than wage. So when these babies are equal, it's a vertical aggregate supply curve, folks. Here is aggregate demand. I'm going to take you into the world of Ronald Reagan and supply side economics very, very soon. And then we will transition back to the US today. That'll be our discussion. So it's a vertical line. You have to understand, this is not some esoteric academic discussion. This is real. The European Central Bank, the old one, believed in this. Milton Friedman, Rutgers' greatest product ever, told us about this in the 1960s when he won his Nobel Prize. So if you did your MBA at Chicago, University of Chicago, or Rochester, or Minneapolis, places like that, the right-hand diagram, this one here, is all you would be. Those are supply side schools. That's all you would be taught. This is the Keynesian diagram here. That's Princeton, Harvard, Rutgers, New Brunswick, the old economics department, Keynesian. So typically these are East Coast, West Coast. These are called saltwater economists. And these are Midwesterners, they're called freshwater economists. So this is the fundamental story here. If inflation has become such that wages have caught up with inflation, the unions have caught up. This is too much. This is crazy. We're going to negotiate for more because inflation may be 6% now. We're going to ask for 8% because inflation is going to go up next week. Stagflation, 70s. Okay. And so very aggressive or tight labor market where workers have market power. That baby becomes vertical. So let's go one step at a time. Here we are now. And let's write down the model they thought they were in. So here's 1970s, the model they thought they were in. So they start off in an Indian restaurant.
Roke, what were treasuries doing in the 70s? Was it as flat as it is now?
No, my gosh, the long-term interest rates peaked at 15.8%.
Oh my God,
was-
so it's
that
the
was-
opposite today, literally the
Yeah.
opposite.
2 years, that was 2 years after Volcker's tightening. And to give credit, Paul Volcker, who fixed that mess, by the way, was a Jimmy Carter appointment. So I'm trying to be fair here, you know, and also the deregulation that Reagan took credit for. Finally, Jimmy Carter got that right, but a little too late, and he was unlucky. So I wanted to get that in. So I'll be a little balanced. People will say
I've got,
Langdana is
I've got a
nuts.
couple of questions and thought processes. I got my MBA in 1976 from Rutgers. Okay. So
Wow,
I
in the
lived
middle of
through
all
this.
this.
Right. So I lived through this. Now, what I have not heard you state is that yes, Reagan won. Yes, Reagan did go to supply side. Yes, Reagan did reduce taxes, only to turn around within 18 months to have to raise them where they were because he was driving us into a depression like he had left California. And the taxes that we just got rid of were the Reagan old taxes. But we don't talk about that. That's number one. Number two, you talked about the jobs and employment. What I have not heard is demographics, meaning if you look and you say the age that people go into employment is 2025, all those people were born 25 years ago. They're here. If you need more people to work to drive up the employment, you can't get them in the United States because even if they were born today, it takes 25 years to get here. So some of the things that you're discussing, those are known. They have been known.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to go into the Reagan stuff very soon. We're talking about
Okay.
David Stockman, you know, how Stockman jumped ship. Remember all that? And all his Reagan's economists deserted him actually after his tax cuts. You know, each one of those statements you made is part of a longer class. Trust me, I'm doing the best I can in the hour and a half I have.
Okay, and then one other thing, you talk about the market, and I agree with you, because I too am a financial planner, but less than 20% of the people in America are in the market.
And so, you know, on that note, thank you for bringing that up. And, you know, you keep hearing that the stock market is not the economy, the economic growth and the stock market growth, they are disassociated. And that is absolutely right to some extent. So the stock market, since you're on that subject really quickly, we've talked about in previous webinars of SAP bubbles. So much money was printed in the recession, housing crisis, and in the COVID crisis, you know, 120 billion a month, by the way, in the COVID crisis, and 48 billion a month for like 5 years in the housing crisis. And that liquidity has to go somewhere. And we've talked about this in several webinars before. And by the way, those of you who are joining me for the first time, Prachi, if you can drop in, there's a link to all my past blogs, my video blogs and webinars where this has been done in detail, where we discussed how that liquidity went into the housing market, went into the stock market, the quantitative easing we discussed, you know, so we've actually talked about that in the past. Okay, so here we are, model they thought they were in, and this is the Keynesian model. And here we are, Y low, P zero. We're beginning the 70s. And let's do the Carter people said, let's increase G. Let's do a good jump starting, increase in G and increase in M and decrease interest rates. So, fine. Well, what happened is that over time, that world had gone. Reagan hadn't yet shown up with his supply side policies. Now, this paradigm has shifted and it's kind of firming up to be a vertical line. And so that was ordering Indian food in an Italian restaurant. So here we are, this is model they were really in. So they don't realize it at this point. Model they were actually in. The paradigm had shifted. Model they were actually in, this is increasing G, government spending, increasing M, and look, they only got more inflation, P1. But they don't see this right-hand side. They're just looking at this and they're going, what? This is something called the Phillips curve, which is, some of you remember, when inflation goes up in the Phillips curve, output goes up, unemployment goes down, or this diagram we have here, inflation goes up, jobs go up, output goes up. So nothing happened. So what do you think they did? They said, you know what? Let's do it more. So here we are, more. This is steps, this is AD2, this is AD1. So let's do more. Now we will get that good old output inflation trade off the Phillips curve. Now we're progressing through the 70s and they did it again. I just want to show you how messy it was then. So saying the stagflation, here we are, this is AD2, this is AD1, and look at this, P2, inflation went up, nothing happens. Demand pull, G and M in this model, large government spending, large M do nothing to output and jobs. Dead in the water. Only inflation went up. Long-term rates, that was Jennifer's question. Long-term rates, the Fisher effect, which some of you remember. Long-term rates going up. And if you had a 15% mortgage, the gentleman who spoke earlier, at that time, 15%, you would be the star of the party. People would say, everybody, hey, Al, tell them what kind of mortgage rate you got. You'd say 15%. People would go, whoa, what's your connection? How did you get such a low rate? Can you imagine? So here they are, they're going, what's going on? They were in a paradigm shift. They were ordering Indian food in an Italian restaurant. They hadn't figured it out. Now, let's superimpose the oil shocks. Yom Kippur War, October 1973, a holiest day of the Jewish year. Syrians flooded over the Golan Heights, T-55 tanks. Egyptians swung over the Suez Canal. 3 times that faked out the Israelis acting like they won maneuvers. The 3rd time, it was for real. Massive intelligence failure. The Russians had supplied them with surface-to-air missiles, SAM-6s, SAM-7s. They were taking out F-4 Phantoms. They were knocking them out of the sky. Not good. So, oil embargo. United States helped Israel. The OPEC countries stopped sending oil. Cost push inflation, monster oil shock, bigger than anything today because there was no fracking. There was no alternate source of oil then. Behold, here we are. Here we go, superimpose cost push inflation on it. And look at this, price even higher. Inflation's even higher. But what actually happened, and of course there was there are 2 oil shocks, 1973 and then 1979, Shah of Iran. The Iranians overturned the Shah. Jimmy Carter said, he's my pal, let him hang with me. Noble thought, Jimmy, but the Iranians went ape. Oh my gosh, another oil shock. Here we go again. And let's combine both of them into cost push inflation and look what actually happened. Wham! The whole aggregate supply curve shoved to the left two oil shocks. And here we are. This is the great stagflation. P very high. And look at what happens to output. Y low. So this is the Jimmy Carter's. And as I said, he finally realized that there was something wrong with this diagram. Demand pull was not, Keynes was not working. This is what actually happened. Just keep in mind, this was the worst part, this relentless increase in M and G, this relentless pushing to the right of the aggregate demand curve, thinking they were in this world here when they were not, pushed it up. And hopefully we are not going to make that mistake this time. We're actually cutting M. So we're not pumping M and G, but that combined with two oil shocks to the left, and we have stagflation, complete devastation. And then, the gentleman mentioned Reagan. And so here we are, Ronald Reagan comes into office. He gets convinced that this is the right model now. And look at this, moving the aggregate demand here is useless, you know? And so he's now listening to these guys from Chicago mostly who said, forget aggregate demand, forget G and M, go with aggregate supply. And that's what supply side economics is all about. Move the supply curve, forget the aggregate demand. And what's supposed to, how do you move the supply curve? Decrease taxes. And as a gentleman again pointed out, he just did it for a short time. Then they went back up again. Decrease taxes, corporate, business taxes plus personal, and get government out of business. Decrease regulation. So just a little historical story here. So, and this is what Trump tried to do. You know, Trump tried to be a Reagan, but Reagan also earlier on infused optimism. It was not hard to do after poor Jimmy Carter, who just radiated despondency. God bless him. You know, despondency. There's a malaise that has gripped our country. Oh my gosh, let me just walk out into traffic and end it. And then Reagan comes, optimism, you know, there's a shining city on a hill and all that sort of thing. And so here we are, this is what the supply siders claim is their model. Reagan tried this with the tax cuts, tried this with the regulation. But you know, for this to happen, you need confidence. The economy, the country has to be happy. C bar, I bar have to be up. Without that in the background, you can take your tax cuts, you buy your shares back, you do share buybacks, which is what happened. You know, you can't have a trade war. You can't be a global pariah. You can't be disenfranchised from the Europeans, the rest of the world, China. So it misfired. That whole Reagan thing didn't work, and other reasons too. So that's the historical story. One more time, this relentless hitting the wrong buttons is what was key. What was key? The oil shocks, of course, would hammer both the models, but the paradigm shift got Jimmy Carter and his economists. Finally, he put in Paul Volcker, by the way, who stamped on money growth. Interest rates went to 20%. Paul Volcker pushed up the federal funds rate to 20%. He said, M is useless. He was 6'4", cigar jumping, terrifying guy. I actually met him in Manhattan. And the gentleman, Giles Mellon, who some of you know, who ran the executive MBA program, was his best friend. And so Giles took Paul's job and Paul became Fed chairman. So we met him in Manhattan and that was an amazing experience someday. And so, but anyway, Paul shut down M and inflation stopped being a problem. He just destroyed monetary growth, 20% increase in interest rates, shut down M, and inflation disappeared from America. We had a horrible recession, you know, as the gentleman pointed out, it was painful, but inflation vanished. It was not a problem. Even when we printed money in the housing crisis and in COVID like crazy, there was a liquidity trap, as we discussed. confidence was low. It didn't ripple out. We've talked about this. Never. We had then Bernie Saunders and Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez saying, oh, print money. You want to spend 2 trillion more? Go ahead and spend. You want free college education? Fine. Till now, the genie is out of the bottle again. And inflation has erupted again. And the problem with inflation this time, stop sharing and come back to where we are now, is that it's across the board. When we had inflation for the last 20, 30, 40 years, whatever, it was in bubbles. It was confined to dot-coms, to housing, to S&P 500, whatever. It was isolated. The whole house seemed calm. One room was on fire. It was overheating also was asymmetric. Now it's again broad-based. It's gone into services now. It used to be in refrigerators and furniture and so on. Now it's in restaurants. It's across the board in services. And the problem with inflation is once inflationary expectations go up, once unions start demanding more money, employers start raising their prices, and you start getting to a wage price spiral kind of thing, which is happening sadly. And so inflationary expectations have taken hold. That's where we are now. It's tough to eradicate once it gets baked in. So
I have a couple of
yeah,
questions.
go ahead.
So, but there's been so much emphasis of wealth building in the markets versus labor, right? So is this a cleansing in some ways? Like, for example, I was looking at price to earnings today, and it's still ludicrous. Look, even with the market down 16%, I'm seeing PE of 58 for Amazon, right? I mean, isn't it just like shaving off the barnacles on a ship? Like, is there a merit to any of this?
Well, yeah, all SAP bubbles need corrections. But the thing is, as you will see, and I'm going to preempt myself, and Prachi, have you sent them the link to the interview I did?
I sent the link to the interview. It's kind of, you have to scroll all the way up.
You're looking at all
Yeah.
these chats. Yes. So there's a link. And where I said in the interview that I am not pessimistic. I'm actually fairly optimistic because there's a huge reservoir of pent-up demand. See, that was supposed to be unleashed now, but Ukraine happened, and we had all this 2.5 years of pent-up demand in every possible sector of the economy. And it was happening. There was euphoria. We were trying to leave COVID behind and burst forth. And then Ukraine happens and takes us all back down. And then COVID again reemerges in China, And so, well, I'm seeing pent-up demand. And remember, private consumption is 70% of our economy, 70, private consumption. So even today's Walmart and Target, okay, they took a beating, but people are moving into services. Consumers are eating out, they're spending. My furniture executive MBA, Jeffrey White from many years ago. Was he in your class, Jennifer? Jeffrey White?
No.
Okay. And he said it's 10 months for a sofa. That's the wait list. And he said business has never been this good before, 40% up. And all the furniture manufacturers who had died in Hickory, North Carolina, they're all back. Furniture back. It's a resurrection of furniture, for example. So
Owners want to spend their money. They want to spend those $1 million 401ks now.
Yeah. And so let's look at what's happening today.
Professor Langdana.
Yes.
Hi, this is Amit. How are you?
Oh my gosh. Amit, how are you, man?
Good. I just wanted to add that, I'm in banking and I worked with those VCs and PE, and there's still a lot of money out there chasing deals.
Exactly.
So,
exactly. Your companies and banks and financial institutions are flush with capital going way back. And, all this stuff about increasing taxes, while we are on that subject, the big boys and girls, and I'm going to be stepping on some toes here, the big boys and girls paid no taxes earlier on. And in spite of all this talk about fairness and tax increases with the Biden tax code, the big boys and girls are still paying nothing. It's the small and medium businesses who are bearing the brunt. And that kind of is annoying and not good.
Professor Langdana, I have just one quick question, if I may, about a comment that you spoke earlier. You were talking about government and how they can influence the inflation, yes or not. And you say that it's not, and I'm not getting into the political kind of what it is, but I'm just wondering, the same that a government can flood the banks with money, and now the situation with the United States in terms of oil and energy, we have all those reserves. If the government wants to influence, and I don't know if I'm wrong or not, but in order to kind of stop the inflation, can you start with the gas and kind of put some gas into the market and kind of pushing those prices down?
No, I mean that using that petroleum reserve was for public consumption. It made a difference of 1 or 2 cents. But Amir, for you, I mean, in Israel, your prime minister was a major supply sider at one point. So I'm hoping all those old articles we discussed are coming back to mind. And to answer your question, I'm going to take you back to the screen now, and let's see what's happening now. So take you back to the screen. Microsoft Whiteboard. Let's clear this board. Okay, so we're going to come back to US now and clear everything up, and let's see what the complication is and whether helping the cost push inflation. Short answer, we can't do much about, and I would not burn my petroleum reserve right now. Okay, so the US today, here we are, here we go. Here is, let's start with the Keynesian, because we are in a Keynesian paradigm. Like Biden is an extreme Keynesian. The whole planet, by the way, now is pretty much Keynesian. So here we are. Here is AD0. Here is P inflation in 2020. Here is output in 2020. And let's change colors.
You mean 2022, right?
Sorry?
You mean 2022?
No, I'm starting from 2020.
Okay.
Samir, good seeing you again. So here we are. And so post-COVID, this going back to what some of you just commented on. So we have consumer confidence erupted, euphoria. Remember that euphoria after you took your first shot, then the second shot, and you're like, nothing can hurt me now. I'm back. Consumer confidence, investor confidence, government spending during COVID, money supply going up, interest rates going down. So all the buttons, and here we are. This is why early 2022, when I thought, okay, it's going to be another routine semester, inflation 2022. So this is like the standard demand pull story. And then let's factor in now suddenly semiconductor shortages, post-COVID shocks. Let's stay in. So COVID coming back, then Ukraine. And so cost push inflation coming out of the blue. And here, make sure the diagram works right. So here we are. Here we go. So this is oil shocks, Ukraine, post-COVID shocks. And so here we are, let's change, here we go. So this is the inflation rate, overall inflation rate in America. So P 2022 now, and 8.3%. So that's that now, and this is now, we've gone down. We have a recession the first quarter. So what we are seeing here is demand pull. That's this baby here. trying to recover all that pent up demand, and cost push stubbornly, which we really, the Fed, we can't fix. Often in the past temporary, but this cost push stubbornly sticking with us. It's got this, lasting power. So this is 8.3%. Okay. So I'm going to define something called the core inflation rate, which in class we really didn't talk about. Well, now we do. So this is the core inflation rate, 6.1%. So please understand the core inflation rate is just the demand pull part. Okay. The overall inflation, so core inflation rate here for you, the core inflation is overall inflation minus the cost push part. And by cost push, it is food, food shocks, and fuel. Those are the two big ones. So the core inflation rate, you're subtracting out the exogenous stuff, okay? The oil shocks and the food shocks. And that's 6.1% today, as of this afternoon. So 2.1%. So basically, the cost push stuff is about 2.1% inflation. So 2.1% of the inflation is exogenous. Biden, God bless him, has nothing to do with that one. Okay, so that's exogenous, hammering us from outside, persistent, not going. 6.1% is this demand pull stuff, and that is the baby that the Feds can handle, the Feds can tackle. And so this is what the Fed has been doing. Fed's soft landing. And keep in mind, this amount here, 6.1%, actually went up from 0.3% in March to that core inflation rate. It went up from 0.3 to 0.6. So that core inflation rate, the demand pull inflation, that baby is still, the magma is still rising to the surface. That is still overheating. So what we have today is a combo, cost push, demand pull. The Fed can only affect the cost push part. The demand pull is nice hefty 2%. I mean, the cost push is a nice hefty 2%. The demand pull is 6%. The demand pull is what the Fed can affect. And we've had interest rates going up 0.5%, and he's promising 4 or 5 more, which seems a little drastic because that's going to turn us, as we saw earlier, when you have a cost push story happening, when the Fed does interest rate hikes, it's going to take a slow economy, which is down here, this one here, and make it even slower. This curve here, basically moving back, is going to take it even slower. So it's going to have a severe retarding effect, given that there's a cost push factor in there. So that's where we are now. If the Ukraine thing gets resolved somehow, and the oil prices abate, if you could just mute your microphones, please. Thank you. Basically the Ukraine thing is over. We started semiconductor production in Ohio and Texas. Supply chains are though again in pieces because of China being locked down. We have somebody sitting in Shanghai, Paris now, who's telling us it's as glum and scary as we think it is. And so cost push is gonna be here for a while. Maybe not 2%, but 1.5%.
But aren't we the nicest cave?
Yeah, so we are, and she's referring to the cave theory, Jennifer. So capital is not an issue. Global hot capital is pouring into a country. Look at all the exchange rates. Virtually every currency is low, has fallen compared to the dollar. The dollar has risen with virtually every currency. Look at the numbers today. So hot capital has been pouring into America from China for the last several years, by the way, coming in here in various forms. I have people in the executive MBA program there sending me emails. Professor, I'm buying a townhouse. This one, or that one. And I'm going, are you here? No, I'm at home. Don't worry about how I'm moving the money. Which one? I can't tell you. Next day, another email or text. I chose that one. And these expensive townhouses, they're moving that's parking sight unseen, or they're trying to come here. So hot
So,
capital
Professor,
and
how
high
much
skilled
of,
labor.
sorry, Professor, this is Elsa. How are you?
Good, good,
So,
good.
I was wondering something that I learned in your class. How much of this is velocity, the turnaround of money in the economy that's causing some of this inflation?
Wow,
That's
beautiful question. So Elsa, when she mentions velocity, velocity is the number of times a dollar bill changes hands. Okay, so the old macro textbooks and back in the day we talked about velocity too. Today it's read the same thing as C bar, consumer confidence. When confidence is high, money changes hands. Velocity of the money increases, and that's what happened to inflation. Okay, we have demand pull inflation, we have cost push inflation. Please note, and there's another inflation affecting us. That's all that money we printed, which we were talking about, the stock market bubbles and so on, which had run into the stock market bubble, into specs, into cryptocurrency, and so on. That comes from all the printing of the deficits we've done. And it hadn't caused hyperinflation here because velocity was low. When confidence is low, the money just sat there. You know, the way I described it was, if a cobra bites you, it's only poisonous. It'll only kill you if the venom goes into your bloodstream. In other words, the money is only dangerous if it's actually spent. If the cobra bites you and it doesn't hit an artery, it's just a bad bruise. You don't die. Obviously, you're not going to practice it, try this out at home, right? But so when the money was printed 120 billion a month, 160 billion a month in COVID, Bernie Sanders, 2 trillion, 3 trillion, it didn't have crippling hyperinflationary effects on us because it didn't go into the bloodstream. But now velocity is up again. Confidence is up. I want to eat out. I want to go on those carnival cruises. I want to do this. I want to go out. I'm tired of sitting at home. And here you go.
so this
Velocity
is
is
a
coming up.
post-COVID effect of investor confidence,
This
right?
is like the most awful perfect storm in the sense that of inflation. We got the monetization of past deficits now actually becoming inflation because of velocity going up, ELSA or C bar going up. We have demand pull, the good kind of inflation, which, Jerry Powell seems to think that's the only inflation happening. But then we have this cost push, which we can't do anything about, which is exogenous. So we have 3 different factors. There's another one, which I've talked about in past webinars, which is self-induced. The trade war, the tariffs. Mr. Biden, lose those tariffs, the Trump era tariffs. They have never worked. Smoot-Hawley comes to mind in the Great Depression. It's a lose-lose. I don't have time to go into that now, Mr. President. Watch the blogs, please. But it's a lose-lose because American consumers pay that tax. You're not nailing the Chinese. Mom and pop America are paying the tariff. Lose it. At least you lose that component of the inflation, which is caused by the trade war. Let it go. Do it quietly. So mom and pop America don't accuse you of being soft on China, whatever that means. So that's another thing. So,
So,
so there's a
so
blog somewhere, just a second, on my, you see
mhm.
the links, poke around. There's a whole thing on inflation, some few from some months ago.
So
So
you're saying you
with-
don't believe in modern monetary theory? It's such silliness.
And the thing is, thank you. We talked about there's so much we discussed on modern monetary theory, MMT, and as we saw, and mercifully, I've been consistent. Please, right? In all these sessions on MMT, it wasn't a theory, it wasn't modern. It was that perfect, weird macroeconomic storm where the cobras bite, kept missing the arteries. And there you have it. And now, of course, MMT is gone. No one mentions it.
So if we were to able to reverse or at least have more supply of workers, would that help us with this
Yes.
multiple
Yes, we have to.
situation that's going on? That if we felt, let's say, for example, some miracle Congress, we can get our immigration thing under, fixed somehow. and we are able to tap into other workers, that means that it will help this situation,
Wow.
no?
Thank you. And look at Jesse Cohn's comment. That's thank you, Jesse. So real wages are falling. Inflation is much harder than wage gains. And so real wages are falling. What's happening with, thank you, Elsa. What's happening with the labor market is that, as you saw from Jesse's chat, just happened to pop up, inflation's higher than wages, and your wages get adjusted only once a year at work. Inflation is going up all the time. So what do workers do? They change jobs. Every time you change your job, you recalibrate your wages to inflation or a little bit higher. And so many of you guys out there are changing jobs every few months now. And every time you change jobs, from what I've been hearing from your emails, you get 25% more in your salary. That's what's happening now. So you have this great resignation, as it's called, where workers are changing jobs rapidly because it's such a tight labor market. But to answer your question, Elsa, how to get workers back? First of all, one thing is workers loved working from home. Now forcing them to come back to work is not working, especially in finance. All of you in finance, you're supposed to drag back into work. They're going, you know, what the heck with this? I don't need this. They're stepping out. So that's been an issue. Immigration, try and get that going back up. That's an issue. Women, you need to get women back in the workforce. That's an issue. But till the kids can go
So,
safely back to school, that's not going to happen.
so
So
basically from the whole Biden plan, I thought for everything that he was trying to do, I definitely thought that the daycare was a major factor to get women back. So as you said, the boomers retired at a higher rate. Unfortunately, people died. So there's certain aspect of what workers we lost, we're never going to get back, unfortunately. But if we can get the women that we lost
yeah,
into daycare, I thought that aspect of the initiative would be good.
that, and I'm thinking that was the main reason for that part of the budget, to get the women's participation rate back up. But sadly, the Build Back Better of Biden is going to be severely cut back, because the deficit GDP ratio, it's now 6.6%. It wasn't a problem. It was at 17%, 15%. We didn't have the scary inflation then. The modern monetary theory was happening. But now we can't keep spending because we can't keep printing anymore because inflation's here. And so suddenly all those big spending plans, you know, are going to be cut back. You know, you don't need cinema and
Professor, but think
munchkin
about this.
to,
We're talking about spending, but those of us who study the government's budget, like our budget, those programs only account for 2.9% of the budget. The military counts for 42%, but we haven't won a war since 1945. If we were in jobs where we spent 42% of our company's resources and we never brought home a success, we'd all be in your class every night looking for a job. Okay, but we don't address that.
no, and that we don't. And the thing is, you know what? The sad part is we don't need to spend more. This is a hot potato. So guys, I know I'm stepping on toes, but we have so many of these social programs designed to help people. But the real issue is that we don't connect the programs to the work. Let me give you an example. We have a place in Virginia, and there was a Wrangler factory, and it went out of business. And so I'm an economist. I talk to people. I don't just rely on data. So I was talking to some of these guys, and I said, so there are all these programs to retrain you for computer coding and data entry back some years ago, and it's free. And why don't you sign up? They had no idea that the programs even existed.
And that's fine, but I'm going to say everything can be solved by math. Meaning, if you're going to cut your individual budgets, right? And you were looking for the best bang for whatever money you had, would you cut 2.6%, 10%, and only get 0.2%? Or would you cut 40-some% and get 4%?
Well, I know what you're saying. Go where the the spending is, but the real spending, by the way, is in healthcare and in interest payments on debt. That's the big one. That's what I was talking about earlier before you jumped in. And that's the deficits, and that's huge. And next is going to be healthcare after that. And we were thinking of even putting more money in healthcare. Those are the big components. Now, defense spending, you know what? We don't have hypersonic weapons anymore. We are still now again playing catch up. The bad guys are spending more.
But again, I say the following.
Professor,
All
Yeah,
that's
go ahead.
good,
Thank-
but we
go
haven't
ahead.
won a war. The last
Yeah.
one we won, just for you people to know.
Well, I can't help you
historically,
with winning
we
a
won
war right
Grenada.
now. That I'm not an expert on.
No,
Okay.
no, we won
I
Grenada.
have a
Good.
question that
Yeah,
is
Pierre.
related to this
Yeah,
topic.
thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, just as the last gentleman pointed out, we do spend a lot in military spending, but as a member of the military, I've noticed that a great portion of our spending has very little to do with defense, and it's more so about keeping, contractors employed and selling weapons, which is an economic function. So my question is, how much of the military spending is actually, a net positive and necessary to keep our economy function,
So,
and how much of it
yeah.
could be scaled down?
You know what? So in macro, if you remember, we did multiplier effects. Remember that? Or if you were in class with me. And so it's a very easy piece of algebra to see where the largest multiplier effect is. But now when you go into issues like what element of G is good, remember earlier I said these are hot potatoes. There'll be somebody on the screen who will say, forget unemployment benefits. We should just put it in infrastructure. There'll be somebody else like me who would say, no, put it only in education. That's where it should be. So it really stops becoming a question of numbers. In class, I like to joke, good G is whatever is good for you. And I'm walking away from that. I don't have the time to discuss which G is good and which is not. That is a huge hot potato. All I'm saying is, though, we need main battle tanks. The M1 Abrams is old. You're looking at Ukraine, we need to upgrade. We are behind in hypersonic weapons. Air Force, we are doing great, but the rest I can't go into now. Defense contractors, yeah, we all know that's
No,
great. Any other macro questions,
thank you
guys?
for that answer.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
thank you for that answer, Professor, but that's not my actual question. My question not necessarily is what is the good spending. My question is, could our economy even function without this military spending? That it's almost become a vital part of our economy.
Well, the Europeans are spending more, so we won't be spending that much on NATO. And one good thing, if I can dare say, about Putin's invasion of Ukraine is NATO is back in business. And we have an open goal, actually, and I'm going to actually bring this plane down with this comment. So it seems like it's doom and gloom. It seems like, well, where are we going from here? Jay Powell is going to stand on the brakes, and it's not demand pull inflation, it's cost push. Consumer confidence is down, 40-year low. Having said that, I'm actually optimistic, everybody, believe it or not just because you're there and we want to end on a good note, but because consumers are very resilient, and not just in America, but certainly in America. Consumption is 60% of the economy, 70% pre-COVID. And so private consumption is big. We were all set to take off till Ukraine happened. And I just think that the United States, which was out on a limb, suddenly now is reintegrated in the world economy. Not China. China is turning away. It's the tragedy. Xi Jinping is taking China down. That's a different story. Maybe for another webinar. We had a great poignant discussion earlier before we started. But Putin has created a vacuum. NATO is together, finally, and for real. The United States is finally re-engaging with the rest of the world. The whole embarrassment of Afghanistan pulling out, which was an embarrassment, is gone. Now blanketed over by Ukraine. So there is an open goal for the United States. There is an open goal for India. Look at India. This might finally be India's moment. I hope Prime Minister Modi doesn't derail it like he did last time with the demonetization. So Modi ji, best thing for you to do is do not stir the pot, stay away from the dal. In fact, stay out of the kitchen. Modi's people, change the swipe code, swipe card access, keep the man out of the kitchen. Leave India alone right now. Vietnam, keep your eye on Vietnam. That country is going to explode. We're actually working with a Vietnamese school right now, and they're building a deep water port. They don't have to go through Singapore anymore. They may already have built it. Keep your eye on Vietnam. So suddenly there are pockets of optimism. We have many open goals to score. And I think it will not be the government. There will be a stimulus plan. Biden's going to launch a Keynesian stimulus plan. We will do good spending, good G, whatever works for you is good G. That's too hot a potato for me to handle today. It's going to happen, not as much as he planned earlier. G is going to go up. There's going to be demand pull recovery. That's not going to be if, there will be. The cost push will eventually burn off, and that demand pull recovery will again pull us out. If you're in the market and didn't sell today, you didn't lose anything. So try and sleep well tonight if you didn't get out today and if you're not on margin. So I'm actually quite optimistic, and I'm hoping that in the months and years to come, your C bar and I bar, your consumer confidence, investor confidence always stays high, because mine is high right now. So I wanted to end on that note, and I'll take some questions. And I see Gopalan finally got a smile on his face. You're looking awfully depressed there earlier. So
Hello, Professor.
Wesley, Jen, yes.
Hello,
Go ahead.
Professor. This is Angela. I had a question. Are you sure? I know you're optimistic and all. I mean, one could look at it the opposite way, right? Thinking, are we heading towards stagflation? Just based on some of the things we're seeing.
Angela, keep in mind, and thank you for that question. Keep in mind that what made stagflation the great stagflation was this insistence on pressing the wrong buttons. Keep doing G, keep doing M. They kept doing more. You know, it's not an Indian restaurant, and you're ordering the korma, you're ordering the tandoori chicken. And you're getting weird stuff from the kitchen. You know, you're ordering dal and you're getting minestrone, and you're going, let me try it again. And that was what made the inflation ratchet up more. And now we know what paradigm shifts are. You know, we know that suddenly everything that's worked for you in macro blows apart. Well, I'm hoping we do. We've learned from that by now. So I'm not seeing the great stagflation. I'm seeing a hard, soft landing. If I can split hairs, I know I'm sounding like I'm splitting hairs, but I'm seeing a hard, soft landing, and a complicated one, as Paul pointed out. You know, we have GDP in contraction, but we have a tight labor market. But it's not really a labor market, because so many people are sitting out, and baby boomers are gone, and women are gone from the labor, and immigration's gone. So the labor number is a very muddy number right now.
Hey, Professor.
Hey, Frank.
It's
Oh
Frank.
my gosh.
It's good to see you. Thanks for taking the time once again. Tremendous. I had a couple of questions for you. You know, back on Jerome Powell and on monetary policy. You know, Jerome Powell was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here. You know, if he stops raising rates,
exactly,
he's gonna run the risk of inflation getting kind of out of control, and you may have to do a Volcker. Okay. The second,
I'm sorry, I lost the last word. You may have to do what?
You may have to do a Volcker.
Oh my gosh, do a Volcker. Okay.
Right. Okay. And then, you know, and the other side is that if he stops raising rates, you know, the market would like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then, but you run the risk of inflation getting too high.
You know what? The messaging is so important, Frank. That's a beautiful question. The messaging is so important. And speaking of the messaging, even today's, the stock market goes down 1,000 points, and Biden's press secretary, what's her response? Her response is, well, we don't look at the stock market numbers. We can't do anything about that. And That's true. They don't look at the numbers, and yeah, they can't. But mom and pop America, that's not what they want to hear. What mom and pop America want to hear is the president is acutely following what happened in the stock market. He has talked to Chairman Powell today, members of Congress. He's closely tracking what's happening. We are on it. You know, and so the messaging
Proof,
is,
that's assuming that mom and pop America even know who Chairman Powell is. I mean, that's kind of, sorry.
you know, I know.
I apologize.
I'm doing the, hi, Christopher, I'm doing the best I can.
Thanks,
So, but you're right, Frank, he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. So what Jay Powell has to say is, you know, this is not a conventional overheated economy. There are parts, components of this inflation that are from outside. Until those components come down, it might be overzealous to step on the brakes and traumatize the economy any more than we have to. So the Fed may consider a wait and see period. We are not saying we're not going to do a soft landing, but we may reconsider stepping on the brakes so aggressively. And that market's going up 500 points tomorrow. I'm going to buy in the dip today. But who am I? I'm not going to be talking to the media.
But that's what I'm kind of saying to you is, you know, if Jerome Powell says, okay, we're done, you know, everybody's happy and everything, stock market pops up, everybody's happy, then inflation gets kind of out of control, then he has to come in and do a Volcker.
Yeah, and then there's also valuation problems, like I said earlier on.
Price multiples are coming down because stocks are getting repriced, because they're long duration assets.
You know what, Frank, in your mind, yeah, I know what you're saying, but the thing is that aggregate demand right now is moving to the left. C-bar and I-bar have fallen. So hang on just a second. So that is moving to the left. Government spending right now has been cut back. The stimulus checks, the stimulus spending is over. So G is also right now going down. Biden is thinking of increasing it. So G is going down, consumer confidence is going down. So that curve is already moving to the left on its own. You see what I'm saying?
Professor, if you increase government spending more and you do another Build Back Better or whatever you call it, or G, you're gonna get more inflation.
That's the good kind. So that inflation, Frank.
I don't know if it's the good kind, Professor, because, you know, previously when the Fed printed money and they built their balance sheet, that money didn't go out of the system. Now, when you're doing fiscal, right?
So you know what? So Frank, when you get a chance,
velocity.
So when you get a chance, Frank, listen, read that article that Prachi has dropped in for you. Where what I'm hoping is that innovation. So in that aggregate supply, if we can move that curve to the right, that would be almost too much to hope for. The next big thing, the internet, a positive productivity shock, a post-lithium battery. The Chinese have cornered the lithium battery, come up with a new battery, and we get that market. If Biden can set the stage for an ecosystem where America or any of your countries can come up with the next big thing, then that supply curve, whichever you like, the Keynesian one, moves to the right. You see what I'm saying?
That's where the G has to go.
Paradigm.
R&D. The G has to go into R&D and infrastructure.
Well, yeah, and to Biden's credit, even though the amount of money is not huge, he is putting back money in R&D. Keep in mind, even supply siders will believe that we need G in upstream R&D, like, you know, NSF grants, things like that.
And this is
cool, Professor. Just one more question, just off topic, real quick. You know, there's a theory out there as well. There's a strategist over at Credit Suisse. His name is Zoltan Polster. He came out with a thesis on Bretton Woods 3 that the euro dollar system is really under threat right now, and that the governments of Eurasia, so to speak, are creating their own monetary system. It's a new monetary world order, and their current. If I have the paper, if you want it, Professor.
No, I hear. I know about what you're saying. I'm familiar with that.
And they're pegging their currencies on commodities. What kind of impact is this going to have on interest rates, on the dollar?
So, you know, Frank, on that note, I'm going to quickly talk about crypto, since there were so many questions on crypto, which is kind of tied somewhat to your currency story too. The short
Sure.
answer is I'm not worried. The dollar is here to stay. That's a short answer. Okay. But crypto. So I've been consistent in my crypto comments. What makes the dollar and why it's the global currency is because of, it's not back to gold, as we know, since August 15th, 1971. It's been, there's no Frank mentioned Bretton Woods. That's the old dollar was pegged to gold. The rest of the countries were pegged to the dollar. That was the old Bretton Woods system that disappeared, that broke down in the Nixon era in 1971. And so the dollar is backed by nothing. And yet the rest of the world sends the money to America. It's the safest cave, as Jennifer pointed out. And all the currencies are weakening against the dollar now. Money is pouring in. Why? Because it's the safest cave. Our institutions are strong. Even on January 6th, at that point when we were the most afraid, when you were hanging by a thread as a country, our institutions held, barely, squeak, strained. We held, you know, it was barely there. And so that's what I'm talking about, safe haven. And when people kept coming at me over the years and the crypto, I said, what backs crypto? Anonymity, the blockchain technology, what? And they go, that's the strength, people would say, that it's not tied to any country. And I said, I'll tell you what, let's see how crypto behaves when the bottom falls out. Let's see how crypto behaves when the night gets really dark. Where will people rush to, crypto or the dollar? Well, we got that answer, you know. Crypto lost 200 billion in just a few days. And the same thing with this Eurasian, Central European currency, China and the Russian currency, you know, the new world order, fine. You know, build your currency. That what makes a currency a global currency is not what you announce. You can't say, excuse me, I'm going to be the new, excuse me, can you listen to me? Excuse me, I'm going to be the new global currency from now on. No, it's like respect. You don't announce it. It happens organically, endogenously. Make your Central European currency, have at it. Actually, more global currencies are better. There'll be less fluctuation in the dollar. But I'm not taking it seriously, Frank, you know, because it's an intrinsic thing. It's a beautiful thing. When we went off the gold standard, people went, oh my God, so now what? What's going to anchor the dollar? And nothing. We had some periods of amazing fiscal discipline, Volcker, Greenspan, till the subprime crisis when we started printing money, you know. And so, in spite of that, in spite of even the petrodollar crisis in the stagflation, when the OPEC countries were embargoing oil to us, even then, Yom Kippur War and all that, even then, where were they parking their money? In the US. They were jumping up and down, burning the flag, jumping up and down, burning the flag and going, oh, excuse me, I need to go move money to the US. I'll be right back. Here, hold the flag. And so with the petrodollar inflow. And so that's a beautiful thing. And, and I worry, you know, in the last few years, I was thinking, you know, all we have is the safe haven in our country. And this is why Singapore, when I'm in Singapore, I tell my Singaporeans, you have the safe haven status that China will never have. And sadly now, China's not going to have for a while. And it's endogenous. That's one thing you can't create. So, Frank.
And Farouk, is the problem from the supply side is not really, do you think it's a monetary issues or more of a government issues or federal G issues to reduce tariff, to fix the supply chain problem, to do some deregulation? Do you think is a monetary side to fix the supply side? Is it a monetary or more of a government?
Well, you know, Ahmed, the tariffs is it's a Biden thing. It's not even a Congress thing. The tariffs, the U.S. You know, we have Super 301. We have PL 480. You know, the U.S. is a country where it can unilaterally put tariffs on another country. The rest of the world have to go through WTO. We don't. George Bush Sr. worked it. And so that's something Biden can remove right away. Regarding supply chains, this is the large supply chains are not moving from China. Okay, so don't get your hopes up. China accounts for 30% of the world's exports, 30. Even now, it was 28 before COVID, it's 30, not today, not with the lockdown, 30% more than America, Germany, Japan put together. India, 5%. So China is a big story, whether we like it or not, whether Xi Jinping is turning away or not, it's a big story. So the entrenched supply chains are there. The new supply chains are Vietnam, Cambodia, maybe South Africa. So if you're thinking of starting a business now or doing offshoring, you are not thinking China now, not the new stuff. But the stuff that's entrenched is,
the autarky question.
yeah, and so what you have is so much is coming back. You know, now comparative advantage, it makes sense to make semiconductor chips in Ohio and Texas. You know, and the thing is, Ahmed, you don't need a policy. The market, that's the beauty of global trade. Global trade figures out who can make it more efficiently, better, and cheaper, and it happens on its own. The more you try and get involved with tariffs and subsidies, you just mess it up, and then you get retaliatory tariffs, and it's a lose-lose after that. So it's already happening. Inshoring is already happening to some extent. And, you know, what Biden could do is bring down taxes, the tax rate, remove some of the tax loopholes. Corporate America would like that. It would affect investor confidence. The loopholes is the problem. The big boys and girls are still not paying taxes. That would be a huge step. And the messaging is so important. As I said, he needs to say, I understand. We have to recalibrate. And he has to stop doing, I feel your pain. I know you're hurting. You don't say that. I know I'm hurting. Don't tell me that. He needs to say, the rest of the world's eyes are upon us. This is when we show what we are made of. America is always late to the party in the beginning, but we end up on top, Singapore, or whichever country you like. This is the messaging, inspiring C-bar and I-bar.
So basically, Professor, to end this, just when you say you're optimistic, so what are you thinking? This is a year, 18 months? What are you thinking this is going to take?
Well, to talk to Putin first and see what's happening with that business. And then semiconductor, and the problem with semiconductors, it's so capital intensive. You know, it's not like building ventilators. So it's going to be through 2023 that we resolve the semiconductor thing.
Putin's a real wild card, because if he doesn't step down and he gets desperate, I mean, you know, it could be problematic. He could do all kinds of craziness.
Yeah, but you know, the good news is that the dictators are going, Jennifer, one by one. It's the beginning of the end of a string of dictators all over the planet. I'm not going to mention the names, but they are going. So the high water mark is gone. So
and Russia is such a small economy now. I mean, it is nothing like it was when it was the USSR. It really has become, you know, it doesn't really matter in the world stage anywhere near as much as it used to. Now
no,
it's just,
I mean, it's like, isn't it like Finland? I mean, Iceland or
Italy?
Italy.
It's the size of Italy,
Texas,
I think.
Yeah.
Texas, the economy of Texas.
Same thing. Yeah.
Well, the only issue is limited surgical strike nuclear. That's the big fear now. But other than that, you're right.
Hey, Professor.
Farooq, this is Gopal.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I mean, let's take a couple of more and go ahead.
This is Gopalan here, Farooq. So great session as always. Thank you. Quick question. I think to your earlier point that you said the corporate taxes of large corporations are not paying their fair share. If you look at the tweets of the last few days, there's been a real war of words going on between Jeff Bezos and Biden. Biden is claiming that, you know, you want to bring down the inflation, pay your fair share of taxes, and Bezos countering and saying, you know, yeah, we can talk about taxes, but to bring down the inflation, that's the critical aspect, right? It's fine to talk about taxes, but really the core issue is to bring down the inflation, and stimulus package is only going to increase that on an overheated economy. Just want to get your views. Like, is this just politics? Like, how much each one is like playing into this inflation?
But you know, that's what Frank was saying earlier. You know, it's a, you know, for the Feds, it's a really tough situation. So on one hand, if they say we're not going to raise interest rates as aggressively as we said we would, well, you and I are going to say, phew, makes sense now. But mom and pop America are going to go, wait, corporate America is going to go, wait. So he's soft on inflation. They're not going to hit the brakes on inflation. Are they taking the eye off the ball? The White House is already saying we're not watching the stock market. So the Fed's going to say we're not watching the economy. So as opposed to, we're going to raise interest rates, we're going to kill inflation. You and I know that's going to be too cruel and too painful, but it's, you know, so it's the messaging. And again, you're messaging against people with imperfect information. This thing with the taxes and all, yeah, that's kind of bizarre, you know. Yeah. And remember, it's national tax revenue. You can't isolate this company and that company. You're talking of a whole category of companies. And but there you have it. Pierre, sorry, you have your hand up for a while, or was it from earlier?
Hey, Professor, is it okay if I ask?
Frank. Yeah, go ahead, Frank. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Frank.
I just wanted to talk quickly about oil prices. You know, about 30% of the country lives paycheck to paycheck, and they feel inflation more than anything. You know, if you look at Target, who released earnings today, a big part of their cost was because of freight costs and transportation, and you know, that's oil prices. I mean, do you think a decrease in oil prices, maybe you increase production? You know, I know they canceled like new lease drilling and they shut the pipelines off, but you think any of this, an increase in production, would help you know, bring down inflation? And this is one of the things that the administration could do, because Jerome Powell can't do that.
No, that's the cost push stuff, and that's the 2% we talked about, 2.1%, Frank. And they can. Not all drilling on national.
It may not seem like a lot, but what I was saying is the 30% of the country that lives paycheck to paycheck, they feel that. They'll feel that 2%. They'll feel that 2%.
Yeah, that would have been, that's actually more prudent than releasing the petroleum reserve, because that is to be used, you know, in absolute dire situations. But again, I know why he did it. It's mom and pop America, hey, we're using a reserve. But yeah, so again, get the fracking going, get the pipeline going, but don't throw away all the safety. You know, there are still issues with fracking, but it doesn't have to be so drastic in shutting it down in some cases. So yeah, and you know what? The interesting thing is, just talk about it. Just say you're proposing it. You're going to look into it. You can't just start them back up overnight, but get the messaging out. It's again, I keep coming back to this theme. The messaging has to change. You know, we know he's from Scranton and his dad worked for the unions and he had peanut butter and jellies. Okay, we need to move away from that now. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because listen, I think they're weighing too much on Jerome Powell. They want Jerome Powell to fix everything, like he's the magic man. Like that's it, it's gone, and that's it. It's like, I think they should do some things, you know, on a policy side that could fix it as well. And Jerome Powell doesn't have to go so high, you know, with oil prices this high. I mean, this helps Putin too. It's like,
of course it helps Putin. Basically the
increased production, so the price of oil goes down. Putin will feel that tomorrow.
But you know, as been the political economy is that if oil prices are more than $60 a barrel of crude, that's when Putin has his adventures. So if it's over 60, Putin goes out to play and has his misadventures. And well, you know, that's funding him. And the Saudis, and I'm stepping on some toes here, I'm sure, they do not help. They have been playing both sides since the beginning of time. Don't get me started on them. So
yeah, OPEC already said no multiple times. They're not increasing.
There you go. There you go. But there is much that can be done. But again, it starts with the messaging.
C-bar.
So,
And it's,
Professor, I just have one question. Is
yes,
try to
Alan.
stay on topic, Mr. Clark. India hasn't done as well, it appears, as say China. And you're saying Vietnam is going to boom. Of course, the Indian people I've been associated with are very bright and seem to be hardworking. What can India do to take more people out of poverty, say in India, which is more?
Here, Alan, this one, here you go. If I can show you the cover. This last issue of The Economist. Here we go. This week's issue of The Economist. Everything you wanted to know. Basically, all the chess pieces are on the board. Let entrepreneurship in India explode. And answering your question, why China exploded at 8%, 12% a year for so long. The biggest story on the planet, China finally woke up after falling asleep for 275 years. Because, in democracies, you can't do what you can do in China. In democracies, you can't just tear down 20,000 houses and build flyovers and monorails and high-speed maglevs. Doesn't work that way. There are courts of law. You can't just do it. You can't run roughshod. In China, you could. And China did. And China pulled it off. There was a lot of pain, by the way. Yeah, I can't go into the stories right now. But so India and democracies can't do things that single party economies can do. And China got the infrastructure thing down. And when I addressed all our Chinese alumni 3-4 years ago in Beijing and Shanghai, what I pointed out was the low-hanging fruit has been plucked in China. They've done the bridges, the high-speed trains, the airports, too many airports, overbuilding of roads, blah, blah, blah. Now comes the hard part, innovation. And they can't copy, they can't lift, they can't duplicate, it has to come. And they are doing some of that. But this is the hard part. And that's when the slowdowns began. And that housing bubble, the massive sap bubble in housing that we've been talking about in China for years and years, finally imploded, finally happened 5 years later than I thought it would. And so that's what's happened in China now. So India, if you bet on somebody moving slower, steadier, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, then as Modi doesn't mess it up again. And Vietnam, you mentioned Vietnam. Vietnam actually benefited from the trade war with Trump, with China's trade war with Trump. So what China, and we've seen this before, every time you build a 50-foot wall to prevent trade, somebody will invent a 51-foot ladder, as I'm fond of saying. So when we put tariffs on China, China just shipped its stuff through Vietnam. It was called transshipment. And Vietnam's economy boomed. So Vietnam became really the winner of the trade war with the United States. And they are using their growth wisely. They are very pro-growth. And I see Vietnam as the new China. So one last question, and then we'll call it a day, or an evening or morning, wherever you are.
Professor, I still keep this.
Oh my God, Frank, there's another edition coming out.
Well, I
5th
gotta
edition.
I gotta get it.
No, send me an email and I'll.
Great.
Well, you guys send me an email, I'll send you one. So it's got
Great.
and the thing is a little frustrating. I just got the whole COVID thing down, the post-COVID thing down, and nothing on Ukraine. I'm going, oh man, gotta hide another edition now. So thank you, folks. Thank you so much for hanging in there, and email me
Thank you.
anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on. And I'll see the graduates tomorrow, and I'll see you at a live, Adam, and I'll see you hopefully live at an event sometime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the great
Thank you,
questions.
Professor.
Oh my
Thank
God,
you.
great.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Have a good one, Miss
Thank you,
Langdana.
Professor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Good
Thank
talk.
you,
Stay
guys.
safe.
Thank you, Professor.
See you.
To the next
Bye,
time.
guys.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. These faces are flashing by. Robert, Bobby Bronstein, where are you? Which country? Ram Session, Tracy Flack, my gosh. Wow. Okay. Good night, guys.
Good night, Professor.
Good night.
Jenna. Oh my God.
Hi, Dr.
Bye.
Langdana. How are you?
That's bad. When I see some of you, it's like seeing the rest of your class. All these boom, boom,
Crazy,
boom images
right?
are downloading.
32 years, but still the best professor I
Oh
had
my
in that program.
gosh. You just, thank you.
Yeah.
You're too kind.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye, guys. Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night,
Langdana,
everybody.
bye-bye.
Bye. Wesley, Jen, Giacomo, my God, Srini,
Thank you,
Arun.
Professor.
Okay, bye.
Thank you,
Bye,
Professor.
guys. Bye. Carol, bye. See you.
Bye.
Prachi, you captured the chats, right?
I've got them all.
Okay, thank you. I'll respond. I promise you guys soon. Okay, bye. I'm gonna close this off now.